Exactly 1 year ago, a victim reached out to me saying they were scammed by a billionaire's son in a really big real estate investment scam totaling about $26 million. The Real Deal, Daily Mail, and the New York Post picked up this story the other day. However, they're missing a key element of the story, so let's uncover that today. Billionaire developer Donald Bren needs only 12 words to cut son loose over alleged scam. David Bren, the son, faces lawsuits for allegedly using family name to sell fake Beverly Hills Club memberships. This is The Real Deal, posted on their official Instagram. A quote from Donald Bren: "We do not have a personal or business relationship with this individual." Didn't even name him his son, just this individual. Donald Bren is one of the wealthiest real estate developers in the country, known around Irvine in Orange County, California. About $20 billion verified net worth, one of the wealthiest men in America.
Billionaire Donald Bren and his former girlfriend Jennifer Gold had 2 children together in the 1980s.
About 15 years ago, Donald and David were actually in the news for a very public court dispute over $130 million in back child support payments. The 2 kids, one of them being David, was seeking $400,000 a month retroactive to the days that they were born. However, Donald provided about $9 million allegedly to the 2 kids, and also apparently was going to give them as much money as they needed for education up until the age of 25. Sounds like he more than took care of them. However, they were seeking $130 million and lost.
As an enthusiast, I would say my pursuit is primarily knowledge.
This is David, founder of The Bunker. The Bunker is the heartbeat of the story. It was promoted as a high-end membership club costing about $14,500, where you'd get access to ultra-luxury vehicles. That's not the full story, though. The Bunker was going to be a unique hospitality-focused social club geared towards the luxury automotive enthusiast lifestyle. By investing, you'd have access to other high-net-worth individuals that had invested in The Bunker. That's just part of the story. There's a real estate investment side of the story that's not being covered.
My first company was a track day events company, and I put the company together with my best friend.
I found that company in some complaints. Let's look into the litigation. I found in a complaint that David and his co-founder Miller with this company called DBC, what they were really doing is using funds from DBC to pay LA track day expenses. That was not disclosed to DBC or the board. Found out that all the revenues were going to David. So essentially he was funneling funds from DBC all the way over here to this LA track day without anyone knowing. When searching in the LA County Courthouse, found 24 different litigations involving David Bren. This is the first lawsuit I found for David. It is involving DB Co-working Holdings, sued by Benison Corporation. David and Talia Miller founded this company, DB Co-working Holdings, in January 2016, where they'd lease large open space industrial buildings and rent out the small workspaces on a monthly membership basis. Sounds like I used to do house hacking for single family residential real estate. Sounds like they'd be doing that for large industrial buildings. And in 2018, they came in contract with someone for 1888 Rosecrans Avenue in Manhattan Beach for redevelopment of the building. They reached an agreement where David and his company would pay this guy 12 months, $10,000 a month, $120,000 total for consultation for the redevelopment of this project. However, a month later, they breached the agreement and still owed $110,000, of which they have not paid any of it. A month later, DB Co-working Holdings was sued again by this guy named Tyson Park. Tyson alleges almost $109,000 in damages. Tyson alleges the $109,000 is basically business expenses, hotels, investor dinners, airfare, totaling $109,000 over about 1 full year. One thing I absolutely love with litigation is when the next day the company then turns around and files a cross complaint against Tyson, David, and Talia Miller. This is where things got really interesting because I thought David and Talia were the co-founders of DB Co-working. The complaint alleges that David and Talia are garden variety corporate thieves. They allege embezzlement. So these two have operated DBC as their own personal piggy bank, enriching themselves as well as their family and friends, including their associate and fellow director, Tyson Park. When I first read this, I was like, whoa, Tyson Park is suing the company for $109,000, but then is getting sued along with David and Talia. Apparently, these three have stolen over $1 million of DBC funds. They allege it was on personal expenditures through fraud. Down here, mismanagement. They have never generated an operating profit at any of their locations, even though they said they did. DBC lost millions of dollars under their watch, and they're seeking in excess of $5 million from damages and attorney's fees. There's no question that Donald Bren is the father of David. If you've ever wanted to know about your family ancestry and DNA, I recommend checking out a company I partnered with, MyHeritage. I've been interested in finding out more about my family ancestry and DNA, so I'm excited to get my results back in just a minute. And this is a super easy process. They send you a kit in the mail. All you need to do is a simple cheek swab that takes about 2 minutes, and you send it back so they can get to work in their lab matching your DNA with your family's history. I've never looked up my family's ancestry. I'm guessing it's an assortment of European countries with none bigger than about 10%. I'm clicking on the results for the first time. I'm excited to see what it comes up with. Only $29. You can do this too. Wow, almost 28% Irish, 23% Germanic. Wow. I just watched the movie Der Untergang, so maybe it was a sign. 18% Scottish and Welsh, 11% English. Okay, this is really cool. 19% 7 more ethnicities. So what's that? I think that's over 10 combined. Here's a full breakdown of my entire ancestry and all the countries that I come from. Everyone from around the world can utilize this service to find new relatives that you never knew existed through your shared DNA. And if you live in the Southeast United States, you might want to use this service to make sure you're not dating your cousin. Hey, I'm from Georgia, I can make that joke. But seriously, this is a great way to find out more about your family's history, and I'd recommend giving it a try. MyHeritage is running a special promotion right now for everyone watching this video. Click the link in the description below, scan the QR code, or use code Spencer to get your DNA kit for just $29. So you can find out about your ancestry and DNA today. In June 2020, we have a lawsuit filed by Matthew Fink against David in the bunker. Defendant Bren is a serial promoter of purported business opportunities. This feels like the perfect line for anyone involved in an MLM. The blue is allegedly what David did wrong. And so in March of 2019, Fink and Bren entered into a settlement agreement. Essentially, the agreement was that David induced Fink to invest $600,000 in this DB business. I found in other litigation that Matthew Fink might have been on the board. So I imagine he said, hey, give me $600,000 for this new company where we go and buy commercial or lease commercial buildings and rent out the spaces, and I'll put you on the board. Matthew Fink alleges that he was only paid roughly $345,000, so he still owed $255,000, and Bren has not repaid the debt. So on or about October 1, 2019, so 5-6 months later, Fink loaned to Bren alter ego defendant bunker the sum of $25,000. Here is a major issue that I found with a lot of the litigation is that David Bren personally guaranteed repayment to Fink of the bunker loan. He said this to many of the plaintiffs in these lawsuits, and we'll find out that David has a little bit of issue of paying people back. Matthew Fink also alleges another issue with David. So March of 2018, David Bren goes to a BMW dealership and says, hey, Matthew, in recognition of your investment into DB, we're going to get you a company car. Instead, while at the car dealership, I want you to think of how funny this is. Picking up the automobile, David Bren, under false pretenses, induced Fink to personally guarantee a 36-month lease of the BMW. So this company car that David said, hey, congrats, I'm going to give you the company car. I just need you to personally guarantee the loan. As you can imagine, Bren has failed to meet these obligations in making the payments to Fink. In December 2020, Fertitta Capital sues David Bren in the bunker. Any of you who like the Houston Rockets or the UFC, you might recognize that name. In January 2020, Fertitta Capital and the bunker enter into a sublease. So David was going to have some office space for his company. I believe it was in West Hollywood. Fertitta Capital and defendants agree to a security deposit of $218,000 with a monthly payment of rent of almost $25,000. Of course, the defendants have failed to fulfill their obligations. They have not paid many of the rental payments, and they have not paid in full for the security deposit. They have yet to pay it, and they accessed the property for almost a year. Many of Fertitta Capital's calls and emails have been unanswered. This seems to be a common occurrence with David. When he starts owing people money, he stops answering the phone. In March of 2020, just a couple months after reaching an agreement on taking over their space, the defendants, David Bren and his company, The Bunker, were having a little issue sending the wire payments. So they wanted to send $50,000. We'll try sending a smaller one to see if that works. We'll cancel the larger one. A week later, when it didn't go through, the defendants would say, hey, we'll send 2 cashier's checks for the outstanding balance since we're having issues with the wire. Not only did Fertitta Capital only receive one of the 2 checks, but it was not a cashier's check, and the check bounced due to insufficient funds. Surprise, surprise. Defendants represented that they would go to the bank. This is now another week later. And so we'll go to the bank and ensure the wire transfer would go through smoothly when we go to the bank, Defendants stated that they would be unable to process any wire transfer because one of their partners were overseas. This is very common with David, is that once the money issues start piling up, he always has a new excuse. April 9th, just a couple days later, defendants represented that payment would be made soon. I got you guys. Just keep waiting. Just keep waiting. Just another month. Defendants only sent one wire in the amount of $25,000 from Mr. Bren's personal account. Fertitta Capital earned a judgment of almost $600,000 against David and his company, The Bunker. Here's a very important email that David sent to prospective investors that the news publications have not shared because they wouldn't know about. What David was doing was using his dad Donald's name. Remember, Donald, the very respected, very wealthy real estate investor and developer. He was using his dad's name. Hey, invest with me, invest in The Bunker, and you'll get access to A+ deals with my father. In this email I'll share with you, these are some very well-respected funds. And so David, maybe he raised money from these people, I don't know, or he has a very good habit of lying about this. Hey, I'm raising money from all these really legitimate funds. Do you want to join in on this fund? We're going to go buy some real estate. That is what got some of the really high-end investors to give him money. Here's kind of an example of that. In the Daily Mail, there was a quote from a guy named Chris Rising, who's an associate of the Bren family, whose LA realty firm was roped into David's attempts to buy Mr. C's Beverly Hills Hotel. I believe that David was claiming that he'd buy this Beverly Hills motel, maybe renovate it, and end up selling it for a profit. So David presented like he could have picked up the phone and called his father right away. I think this is a very important element. Why a lot of investors got duped is because David lured his dad, getting access to his dad's deals as part of investing with him. We have a lawsuit December of 2023 by the plaintiff Nancy Liu against David and The Bunker. August 20, 2021, plaintiff Liu loaned $100,000 to The Bunker. The agreement stated that she would receive 8% simple interest. A year later, things went south. The plaintiff said, hey, I just want my money back. And so they reached a repurchase agreement where David would send back the $100,000. How do you think this went? David also stated that he would get the agreement to his franchise team to be processed ASAP. This idea of a franchise team is kind of funny because I don't think he had any team. David Bren responded that he was waiting on a signature from another former investor and informed plaintiff that she was already teed up in our system to be paid out. Again, remember what I told you. Every single time it comes time to actually pay back the victims, David would always give you the runaround and always come up with an excuse. A month after that, Bren texted plaintiff and stated, hey, Nancy, apologies for not responding sooner. I got my partner to agree that if we don't have the other signature page from the last member of this group by tomorrow, we will pay you out regardless. So hang tight, and by next week, regardless of what happens, he will submit the payment to you. That is not true. However, once again, no payment was made and plaintiff did not hear anything from Bren. Fast forward another 9 months, Bren and The Bunker finally made a payment. It was $10,000, not the $100,000 owed, but $10,000 as a sign of good faith, I guess. November 16th, so now this is 5 months later, Bren and The Bunker and plaintiff, they reached an agreement. Okay, great, I'm going to pay you back. The agreement required 4 $10,000 payments, and the final $50,000 in principal and 8% interest on the $100,000 principal was to be due on March 1st, 2024. This is coming up on 3 years that Nancy's been involved in this investment. I was able to find Nancy's email, and to date, she's still only received the $10,000. April 2023, we come across our next lawsuit filed by IKP LLC against The Bunker, David Bren, and Julian Hepikausen. In 2022, the defendants wanted access to suites at the Miami Grand Prix, so they reached out to Johnny Dodge of GP Management. The Bunker would pay $120,000 for each suite acquired at the event by March 29, 2022. They wanted 2 suites for the next few years. This is where David and The Bunker figured that they could attract high-end investors because a lot of people with money attend these types of events. However, they breached the agreement by failing to make the initial payment. Just a couple weeks later, Hepikausen, at the direction of Bren, sent an email to plaintiffs saying they would update on making the initial payment soon. As you'll find here, there's a few different dates listed. They just kept coming up with an excuse as to why they couldn't make the initial payment. Bren made this false representation on behalf of The Bunker in the hopes that plaintiff would not seek $120,000 for the second suite. Essentially, David was able to go out and get the second suite without the help, as he alleges, without the help of the plaintiff. Plaintiff is saying, no, you needed my help to get it. At the end of the day, he didn't make any payments. These dates indicate that the plaintiff kept asking for an update and were just not receiving it, and there was always an excuse why they couldn't make the payment. They just continued to make false representations of when they will tender the initial payment. Again, this is many months to a year later. IKP was ultimately able to get a judgment against The Bunker Master Holdings in the amount of $130,000. The purple here in the middle is how they were allegedly going to pay it out. I still don't know if they ever received the money. The next lawsuit was filed January 2024 against The Bunker and David Bren. Bren claimed that he had actually raised $5 million from investors, with at least another $15 million committed by a principal investor out of Saudi Arabia. He said he had raised another $25 million by signing up 100 founding members who had already paid the first annual $250,000 membership fee for The Bunker. David lied about the initial investors into The Bunker. I think this is how he was able to entice some high net worth individuals to give him money. If you look at this list here at the top, this is who he said was investing in The Bunker. He also lied about purchasing land in Beverly Hills. This is where he would build The Bunker's planned clubhouse, restaurant, and hotel. He said the $40 million that he had raised to date, which I don't think was accurate. He needed to raise working capital because that $40 million would not immediately be accessible. Bren represented to these plaintiffs that he would partner with them to bring the bunker concept to Dubai. So he said he has this working concept in America. I'm going to bring it to Dubai. I'll contribute $7.5 million to the Dubai joint venture. This would come from his Saudi backers. The plaintiffs were sold. With that list of investors, of course it makes sense to invest. So they gave him $1 million. The problem is David never contributed the $7.5 million that he said he would. So November 2022, the plaintiffs went out to LA to meet with David and discuss the bunker master's failure. What's going on? What's going wrong? Bren was extremely apologetic, promised to make good, and immediately wrote a plaintiffs a $500,000 check as a payment towards the amount owed. He owed $7.5, but here's a $500,000 check to show you that I'm good for it. The problem is when plaintiffs attempted to cash the check in the United States, it bounced. These two plaintiffs ultimately earned a judgment of almost $1.2 million against David. May of 2024, we've got our next lawsuit against David in the bunker. This investor had a little different experience. He gave David $100,000, and David actually repaid it within 2 months with 25% interest. The problem is that gained his trust. So then when David went back and said, hey, I need $150,000, I'll repay it in 4 months with 33.5% interest, he gave him the money. The problem is he's only received $10,000 back. Remember I told you earlier, David's got a little bit of an MO. He'll give only $10,000. That's all this plaintiff has received to date. David was also sued by Porsche because in July 2022, he went to the Porsche dealership, rented a 2022 Porsche Cayenne, 42 payments on this lease, $1,800. Guess how many payments he made? By October 11th, he had already defaulted on the agreement, and just like all of his other situations, he refused to give back possession of the vehicle, and he doesn't return any phone calls.
I think what I'm most excited about experiencing with the bunker is the community. Getting a big group of like-minded individuals in a room leaves little to the imagination and little out of the range of possibility. And I think that will be the most amazing component. At the end of the day, the bunker isn't the four walls that make up the building. It's the people inside of that building and what happens there.
Seems like a really dry personality. If you watch this YouTube video, he doesn't seem interesting at all, but I think leveraging his father's name, he was able to attract, I've been told, about $26 million from investors. The next lawsuit we'll discuss, filed in November 2023 by James Corman against the Bunker Holdings, David Bren, and Julian Hepicausen. Around January 2023, the plaintiff met Theodore Esri, an agent of defendants, at a networking event in Miami, Florida. Esri pitched plaintiff on investing in the bunker, which was planning to open a location in Miami, Florida. So we had LA, we had Beverly Hills, Miami, Florida, Dubai. Doesn't sound like they actually know where it's going to be. This was a really key part of this story, is that this investor believed that David was under contract on the property where the Mandarin Oriental is located in Miami. I believe that hotel is currently shut down, and Bren represented that your investment's safe because even if the contract for the purchase of the Mandarin Oriental deteriorated, defendants had identified a second property that the bunker would purchase in Miami. So on March 15th, the plaintiff sent defendants $100,000 for their investment. A couple weeks later, plaintiff sent a text message to Hepicausen asking for an update on the purchase of the Mandarin Oriental. Response was, hey, there's no issues. Plaintiff then asked for a copy of the sale agreement. Never was received. So then a couple days later, he sent another text message just saying, hey, what's going on? I imagine the plaintiff at this point was getting a little antsy. So then fast forward a couple weeks, sent another text message. Another couple weeks later, another text message. Another couple weeks later, you see the pattern. Every couple weeks, send a text message saying, hey, we need an update. Not receiving a good response. A couple weeks later, the plaintiff then reviewed a news article saying that Swire Properties, the owners of the Mandarin Oriental, would be developing the property into residential condominiums. He probably looked at that announcement and said, whoa, what's going on? David, I thought you owned the property. So he sent another text message to Hepicausen asking for information. Plaintiff then demanded Hepicausen provide him with the investor update and address of the second Plan B location. Remember, there was a second location in case the Mandarin Oriental fell through. June 29th, so another couple weeks later, he sent another text message. Bren responded that the second Plan B site was for the bunker. It was located in Los Angeles, California. It was Miami, now it's LA. I think this is where the stomach punch really kicks in. This plaintiff met another couple investors. They all realized that they were defrauded and that there was no contract to purchase the Mandarin Oriental. So they go to David and said, hey, we want $100,000 back. But David says, ultimately, we are moving forward with the project to purchase the Mandarin Oriental. 2023 September meeting of the 1640 Society, which is a private and exclusive club of ultra high net worth individuals. Some discussion came up about Bren and Hepicalcin and how there's a purchase in the Mandarin Oriental. I think this is where the defendants realized that they were getting screwed. August of 2023, our next lawsuit is JKCA Properties against David Bren. It is dealing with this location 630 North Alta Drive in Beverly Hills, California. It's alleged that David unlawfully entered upon the real property by breaking and replacing the lock to the premises July 2023 during the absence of the plaintiff. It says more than 5 days have passed. Defendant refuses to surrender the property to the former occupant. The daily rental value that the plaintiffs are missing out on is about $350.
My best advice is just start. So many people get so caught up in, what if I can't do this? I don't know how to do this. I don't have the skill set. And so often it's just getting started and figuring it out. Take so much from that. Come to a room in which you didn't know anything the day before and speak as if you know exactly what you're talking about, but also being humble enough to know when you're out of your depth. I think at the end of the day, you have to trust your gut. That involves taking calculated risks sometimes.
I found this clip to be such a perfect ending to this video. I have no idea how this guy raised money with that dry personality, but I also found it so ironic that the question that was given to him during this interview was, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur? This guy has been an utter failure. He was literally a trust fund kid with a father who's a $20 billion. Now, they might not have the best relationship. I understand that Donald Bren might not have been in his life, but still, you received millions of dollars when you were young, and yet to end up such a terrible fuck up is such an embarrassment. If you were an investor, you're a victim of this, please contact me, email, Instagram down below. I could possibly get you in touch with the other victims. I believe the FBI has been contacted. Maybe they can form a class action to really go after him. Not that this guy's got any money or you'll recoup, but at the very least, maybe you'll be able to contact the FBI and better take him down. Thanks for watching. Thanks again to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video. Click the link down below or scan the QR code and use code Spencer to get your DNA kit for just $29.